So I don't know if any of you know who I am. A couple people do out there, but not too many of you probably. My name is Chris Palmer. I'm the founder of Aviator Training and Angle of Attack. I have an Instagram you can check out. You have my permission to get out your phones and follow me and communicate on there to keep up. I put plenty of videos on that website and just things that I do. So I am a flight instructor first and foremost. I really enjoy teaching. It's one of the best things I've done in aviation. There's just nothing like seeing someone achieve their aviation dreams. I had a student just a couple weeks ago. We finished him off in Talkeetna with Don Lee. He did his private pilot check ride, and it's always a great day. I also do online ground school. So I've been in video for a really long time, and I do different types of ground school online. You'll see a lot of my photo, video, and podcast stuff on my Instagram, and if you follow me there, then I send regular updates, and then I just love to fly like the rest of you. So let me get a feel for the room. How many people are not pilots yet? Okay, several, okay, 4, 5, okay, good. How many are private pilots? Okay, about a third. How many beyond that with an instrument rating? Okay, several commercial. Okay, good. And anything further than that? ATP or something? Okay, good. So a handful of experience. So the idea that we're going to discuss today is, what does someone go through when they first start with their license and building up through their aviation career? How do you stay safe and how do you stay on top of things? Which I think to a certain extent, when we're left to our own devices, we end up getting in trouble. And so I have several thoughts and ideas on how we can do that. Just a couple photos that I've taken to get started. This was in Homer a couple years ago. Northern Lights haven't been that great recently down where I'm at, so haven't had many photos of the Northern Lights since then. This is here in Anchorage. I think this moose has a name. Does anyone know its name? It sticks around here. It's kind of legendary. Anyway, someone named it. This is my son, Apollo. Flying is a family affair. It's just part of my everyday life, and that's how I stay active in doing it. And I try to share that with my family as much as possible. So feel free to follow me on Instagram, Angle of Attack, and YouTube. I've been doing more stuff on YouTube, some maneuvers videos. I just did a pumpkin drop video a few days ago from the pumpkin drop video that was done, or the pumpkin drop that was done several days ago. So that was a lot of fun. And then I already mentioned the ground school, private, instrument, and commercial. Okay, so I want to talk first about the safety fallacy. So a while ago, we had the FAA come down to Homer, and they gave us this lecture for 2 hours about safety. And at the end of it, I had no idea what happened. I had no idea why we had that discussion, what was even talked about in terms of safety. It just kind of seemed like they railed on us, saying, hey, here are the common accidents that happen, and you guys shouldn't do this. You know we shouldn't do that. That's, of course not. But how do we as pilots approach safety in a way that's actually tangible? Because I think sometimes safety is this topic that's just way out there, and we can't really grasp it. We really don't know what it means. Yes, we try to practice it every day, but it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Okay, who's this guy?
He's trying to do us.
Yeah. Okay. So we have an accident on Sunday. What happens on Monday? We get a Monday morning quarterback, right? Like this guy that gets on the Facebook groups and he starts telling everyone how they should do things. We got a Hewlett-Packard hero here. It happens all the time. I see it every single day. Okay, someone knows how to be safer than you. Then we get this guy. What's he doing? Preaching. Okay? Preaching about safety. Constant preaching about safety. Kind of drives me nuts when someone gets up and just preaches about safety. I don't want to do that today. If I do, just kick me out. Okay? I want this to be kind of a group discussion between us. I want to hear your stories. I have a couple pretty boring stories to share, but I'd like to hear some stories from the audience as well. And the way I work is I also want to hear questions as we go along, those comments as we go along, as they come into your mind. I think that'll make things a little bit more lively so that I don't end up like this guy, which I don't want to be. Okay, and then we have all these tools that are thrown at us to say, hey, here's how you do safety. You got to have all these things. You got to do all these things. And I just think it ends up being a little bit out of reach. And I like it to be more real for my students, something that they can actually apply in their everyday lives. So I think one thing for me is I always want to be honest with myself. I want to be honest with my students, and I want to remain humble during that process. So the truth about safety is that flying is not without risk. And this is a difficult conversation to have with a brand new student who may be a little apprehensive about what is involved in aviation. But the truth is that when you are flying, you are taking more risk on in your life. Now, of course, as pilots, you learn how to mitigate that risk and not take on as much as may be necessary sometimes. So you try to push risk away, but flying is not without risk. It inherently is risky. Okay, no one is perfect. We get those Monday morning quarterbacks that act like they know everything, they can do everything, and those are the types that, when I hear someone that talks like they're the best pilot in the world, I run away. It makes me really nervous to fly with that person. Okay? Now, this is a different one, is we are capable of terrible things. So, we've had a tough summer this year in Alaska. We've had a lot of pretty prominent accidents with some carriers that are world-renowned for their operations of being safe. And what I always think about, instead of the Monday morning quarterback, even though I have a little bit of experience, I think, okay, what are the steps that would force me to get into that situation? I just assume, number one, that I can get in any one of those situations and I can force myself into it. So if we start there from a sense of humility and work our way backwards, we say, yes, actually I am vulnerable. I have these human traits that are going to force me to do things. And so the idea is, of course, to break that domino effect, right? So that means we have to be honest. We have to be honest with ourselves before we can really go out and plan on flying safely. So we are going to make you guys hungry today, if you didn't already eat, all right? So I've kind of built this analogy of how we build safety around us in our lives as pilots. So we're going to start with the foundation. So we're going to start with the thought that you just got your private pilot license. Now, when you go through your training as a pilot, you, of course, you're under the watchful eye of an instructor. There are several times that you'll do a solo flight. You know, you have a handful of hours. It's 10 hours. That includes your cross-country time. So it's really not a lot of time that you're on your own. And almost all of those flights are signed off by your instructor. So you have someone watching over you all the time, okay? And then all of a sudden, when you're done, you get kicked out of the nest and you can go do whatever you want. So if you didn't get the foundational training to begin with a good instructor that had a good head on their shoulders and taught you this risk management, then you're going to have trouble when you get out of the nest. So every pilot starts with, of course, a rating of some kind. The most common one is the private pilot rating. You can start with some other things, but it's best, especially if you're going to move up through the ratings, to just start with your private pilot ratings. And that acts as somewhat of a foundation. You're going to experience a few things in your training. You know, you're going to go on your cross-country flight, and you're going to see a few things you didn't plan for. That's what flying is all about, is about adjusting for those things that change. And then we all know that when we get our pilot license, it's a license to learn. I'm sure you've heard that 1,000 times. So it's a license to learn. So any recent private pilots here? How recent?
This spring.
Cool.
In March 13th.
Great.
My check ride.
How many hours since then?
Probably, I did a lot of flying this summer between Fish Camp and Dillingham, so probably say around 100 hours since then.
Cool.
100, maybe 150, somewhere in there.
I might come back to you. That's good.
Yeah.
You're right in the zone I want to talk about. Had someone else back there?
Yeah, mine in May.
May? Okay, great.
Right around 100.
Perfect. Cool. And did you guys fly a little bit this summer?
Yeah.
Cool. And now it's getting all cold and flying isn't as easy. We gotta scrape the stuff off our wings every morning. Gets a little more difficult. So that's right in the zone I want to talk about because have you seen a lot of new things that you didn't plan on
Yeah,
being out there in the real world?
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Flying in here to Anchorage and stuff in the Merrifield and here to Lakewood a few times and did a few cross countries between Dillingham and here and yeah, coming out of like, you know, looking at weather cams before I leave Dillingham and Lake Clark Pass is just completely clear and I get all the way to this end once and there was some fog hanging around, you know, and
Yep.
there's a few times I got a little nervous, you know.
Yep.
But
That's what it's all about. I mean, if you don't have a good head on your shoulders and you get in those situations, then, or maybe not even such a good head on your shoulders, but the training, the risk mitigation, all those things, then you can get in some deep doo. But it sounds like you've done pretty well. You're still here, so that's a
Yeah.
good sign. Okay. Here's just a little video. We'll test this volume. See how it does.
And I don't want to drive this airplane down there.
I have a couple of these videos I've interspersed throughout. This is me teaching a student on a discovery flight.
That's the whole short line. So now we're just gradually coming down at about 70 miles per hour. I'm going to do my last launch of flaps. That's going to be it for my flaps. Okay, look at that. Just like we were talking about before, power is your main thing for pitch. You aim with your power basically. So watch what happens when I add a little bit. See kind of the trend, head up, now we're headed to the other runway. I want to pull back just a little bit more, that's just for demonstration. But if we set it up like this, we trim it out nicely, gosh, it's just, you know, then you're just working the rudder a little bit, working that center line, watching your speed. Let the airplane work with you rather than against you. So then we're just coming on down. We have our last bits of energy going under that wing. I'm going to go power idle. And I'm just going to use the last little bit to increase my pitch. And I'm keep increasing, keep increasing, keep increasing. There we go. A little harder than I usually do. And you can see how it was done flying. So the lift kind of came out from under the wings.
Absolutely. Oh, that's awesome, man. That was actually really smooth.
Was it?
Oh, I felt like it was, yeah.
One of my harder landings recently.
Okay, so that's your bun, okay? That's your foundation. Not very delicious yet. Do any of you guys want that for dinner? I don't think so, okay? It's gonna be pretty nasty for a while until we add some more stuff on it. So that's the foundation of your training your private pilot. Okay, so let us set minimums. See?
oh buddy.
Okay, so setting personal minimums. Now this is maybe more of an FAA talking point, but there's a little bit more to it. And the idea is that when you go out there in the real world, I mean, if you think about Class G airspace, under 1,200 feet is 1 mile and clear of clouds. For a brand new private pilot, that is a terrible idea. Okay, so keeping to the FAA minimums isn't necessarily the smart thing to do. So setting your own personal minimums, there's actually a minimums worksheet on the FAA website that you can use to set your own minimums so you don't go beyond those. So you have a buffer in case the weather changes and some other things change. And that's really important. Okay, there's no guesswork. You don't have to say, oh, well, I feel good about it or I don't feel good about it. You just have some hard guidelines that say do and don't, and here's your risk factor. Protect yourself from yourself, okay? Because I know that in my early hours, there are things that I did that I probably wouldn't share with any of you that I wouldn't do today. If anything, the more experience I gain as a pilot, the more or the less risk I take, the more I realize I don't know. Okay, so now we've added the lettuce on there. Unless you're a tree hugger hugging hippie from Homer, that's not going to be something that you want. Alright. Alright, let me get some context to this. Let me go back. So this happened when I was at about 600 hours of flight time. I was flying a Turbo Bonanza down in the lower 48. This is in Washington where this happened. And so I had some hours behind me, had an instrument rating, plenty of time, and something just crept up. And now you can watch what happened.
You're going to use up every possible inch of runway available. I do not blame you. Pick up any of those rocks. Departing 325. You're not yet. Let me get my mojo. Alright. Alright, boss, you're the man. You can do this. We believe in you. Amazing. That's all we have, sir. Love you. Alright, so let's do it. Speed is alive. Back. Kids in the green. Back. That's just a little scary. Well. Oh boy. Wow. Okay, things we are not doing again. Oh,
Okay, so I don't use that to brag. That was a terrible experience. I hated the adrenaline rush I felt. The only thing I could think about was my wife. It was just terrible, okay? But it was a situation where my training wasn't catching up with the situation I was in. So there was nothing particularly difficult about that airport. I mean, I do way more difficult stuff now in Alaska, but I didn't know what I didn't know, and it came back to almost bite me. So what truly happened there is, as many of you know who fly around trees at these small airports, is wind moves all in and around a bunch of stuff. And so as soon as I rotated, there was wind coming down through a river valley and up over the top of the trees, and it completely changed the wind situation. So all the lift I did have went away. I was kind of flying on the edge, and I didn't even think of bumping to the left to go through the trees. It just happened because of my training, and then I didn't pull back because I knew if I did that, I didn't have a chance. So I was going through the trees before I was gonna stall into them. Not a fun situation. Again, I don't use that to brag. Just, it was way beyond what I was ready to handle. A short field, obstructions, that sort of thing. And we'll watch another one of those later in Solovia. So, plenty of you guys, how many of you guys are flying at small strips with a backcountry airplane? Okay, good, good. So what's the shortest you've done, do you think?
At our fish camp on the Nushagak River, it's probably about like 900, maybe 800 feet.
Okay, that's pretty short.
Yeah.
Does that have trees around it?
No. It's,
Okay.
It's
Pretty
coastal. Yeah, coastal western Alaska. So it's
Okay.
we got a lot of tundra. And
Yeah,
and there's like a beach, and it's like right off the side of the beach there.
perfect.
Yeah.
It's a little easier. You don't have too
Yeah.
many things in your way, as long as you
Yeah.
can get off the ground, okay? So the reason I bring that up is because something like that is gonna look pretty silly to Alaskans. Now, I went to a Part 141 school for my private pilot. It was a university, and you did all your short and soft field landings at 7,000 foot plus runways that are 100 feet wide. I never touched grass or gravel during my private training. You just never experience any of that stuff. And so then you gotta go out in the real world and do an actual short field. You do the maneuver as they taught you how to do it, and it's completely wrong. So it's interesting. Here I feel like a lot of people are going to have a better variety of instructors to help them through situations like that and teach them the real way of doing it. And that kind of goes to the next thing. So we're adding cheese to the sandwich now. And find a mentor, okay? This is part of what you should be doing as a pilot. Find a mentor or mentors. How many of you have flown with a mentor before? Okay? How many of you currently have a mentor? Okay, good. So you're an ATP pilot, and you have a mentor. So tell us about that.
I fly for 121, and we're constantly getting into places. What do the rules mean? And sometimes I'm a mentor. We work off each other. And one of our pilots came up to me the other day and said, you know, what's the lowest RVR we can take off? Well, we're rated down to 600 RVR. He said, well, that's good because I just took off out of so-and-so and this other airline wouldn't take off. And you know, I just want to make sure. So I went back and checked the charts of that airport, and they were only certified for 1,600 foot RVR. So he did an illegal thing.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, we bounce things. What do we not know? You know, like you're talking about. So we're constantly going to get a second opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I read the manual and it says I can do this. They read it. It says, well, it says I can't. It doesn't say I can't do that. So
Right.
you know, you're working in the middle areas here.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely have that.
Great. Fantastic. So for those of you that don't know, an ATP is an airline transport pilot. That's top of the game, okay? Top of the game. And he has a mentor. So that should say something about everyone else to have a mentor. And so what do I mean by that? It could be a friend that's at your same level, okay, that has a private pilot who's maybe done some different things. It could be an instructor that maybe has done some things that you haven't learned before. Maybe you're getting your tail wheel endorsement, or you want to learn to fly in the backcountry. Constantly trying to fly with different people. Now, I said that I flew at a university, Part 141 for my private. Then for my other ratings, I flew with a guy in Iowa who did vaccines for chickens and owned DC-3s and Bonanzas and all sorts of stuff, and flew with him everywhere. I did my instrument in Utah and Oregon, flew to the Oregon coast to get all the actual IFR. I did my commercial in California. I did my CFI in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I did my double I in North Carolina, okay? So I specifically wanted to choose different people that could give me different experiences and round me out a little better. And I even think beyond that, you know, what do I need to grow even more? And that is, I don't know, maybe I go beyond what's required for instructors and do even more. So good places to find a mentor. You can definitely find a mentor here at Airmen. You know, come to the gathering in May and just talk to people and meet people and come to some of these gatherings and get to know each other. You're gonna find out that you're neighbors and you fly at the same time. So why not buddy up and go learn something new from each other? Gives you a new perspective of things. Can give you inspiration if you're slowing down. You know, it's tough as an instructor because people can have all the time and money they want, but it takes perseverance to get through this stuff, to get to the next level all the time. And people aren't willing to give effort, really, is what it comes down to. So if you need a little bump, find a mentor that can help you move through that. And then they can give you direct support, kind of like what you were talking about with going over some regs, okay? So now we add a little bit more to our sandwich. Okay. New experiences. So, what's your name here?
John?
John? So John got his private in April. He's flown 100, 150 hours since then. Bunch of new and different experiences because he got out there and he did something. That is where you learn. I'm telling you, if there's one thing the FAA figured out, it was flight time requirements. Because there's just something you learn when you get out there and you actually do it, okay? When you haven't been to that airport before, but you go on that cross country anyway, and you have to find it in a mess of stuff, is pretty interesting. So new airports, new airplanes, and flying vacations. Who flies when they go on vacation? Go and rent an airplane. Got one back here. That's kind of a new perspective, right? You go to Florida and instead of just hanging out at Disney World the whole time, you rent an airplane and go down to the Keys. How cool would that be? You're gonna experience new things. By the way, an interesting story. I flew in Florida in April, and if you ever crash in the Everglades, don't get out of your airplane. Because you'll survive the crash, but you won't survive the creatures in the swamp.
Yeah.
They'll get you. I thought that was really interesting. So there's just something, everywhere I fly, you know, I fly quite a bit. I go down for business for Sun and Fun, for Air Venture. I just went down to Santa Fe and flew from Oregon down to Santa Fe. I love every part of the country. I always learn something new. I had a great time in South Dakota a couple of years ago. I know that sounds crazy, but everywhere you fly is cool. There's just something different about it. So I encourage you guys to kind of look at your vacations a little bit differently. Think about gaining experience when you go to some of these new places. And we're adding more. Who likes onions? Okay, I do too. Could have kept that optional. All right, so here's an interesting experience. This happened last fall, I think.
Altitude climbing.
This is a first flight with a student.
And then our airspeed should be right about 80 miles per hour. Aha, look at that. Oh, we're flying outside the airplane. Okay, do a left back here, turn here over to spit. It's mostly for the takeoff and initial climb. Okay. Because if something were to happen, you would check that right away again at that throttle creep. But you're good now that we've climbed a little bit. Okay. I'm looking at how this windshield is icing up a little bit. I want to make sure that doesn't continue to be a problem. And how we can fix that. Because I can't see a darn thing. A little bit of freezing rain out there or something. And we're going south now. We're just over Barge Basin now, but pretty high. I guess looks like we're at about 3,000 feet.
Oh, there you go. Okay. And just a heads up, this is like here. The rain's a little sticky in spots, so
I just got a little ache, so I'm trying to figure out if we'll go back or not now. Would you give a high rep for that? I'll do it when I get back.
okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
So this was an operator. I actually talked to him about this later.
Yeah, so what's happening?
And he didn't want to
Freezing rain.
do a pirate because he wanted to keep going on his runs all day. And so I went on my flight not knowing there was freezing rain out there. I just thought I was ready to miss.
Down a little bit. So my flight controls, I'm just going to come back down here. Let's see if we can't get to an area where this will turn off. So outside air temperature, yeah, we're not ever going to get above freezing. The adventures of Alaska, man. Yeah. I know. Well,
wanted to do the lesson. And it's not like the ice was thick, it's just a really thin layer that made the window opaque. It wasn't a safety issue really, but it was a safety issue because there were mountains and I couldn't see. So.
Well, this is the type of stuff we don't want to fly in, so I think we're gonna head back and figure stuff out.
Tell me if we need this little spot of clear visibility.
Yeah, you're doing good so far, and I can kind of see out this side. I'll just make this really interesting. And Homer traffic, 242, 3 and 4. We're into the spit, we're back inbound, we're going to be making right traffic on my forward, Homer.
There are very few things in aviation that require emergency attention. Do it right now. Take your time to just kind of think through things and work through the problem. In this case, I wanted to get down lower, see if I can get to warm the air, but it was too cold on the ground.
We don't mess with it.
No, I understand.
We can talk more about that on the ground, but sorry, man.
No, I knew what I was getting into.
This doesn't usually happen. But it's a really good learning experience, right?
Yeah.
To think, hey, this is your first lesson, you've been waiting a year, you want to come back and you want to start flying and get back into this, and there's always pressure to go out and fly again, right? And so it's just hard to say, like, oh, we finally get up in the air and then this happens. But the safe thing to do is to just go back home.
Well, I completely understand.
Alright.
What's the alarm?
That's my tail strobe. Creates a lot of power and it goes to the intercom system. I've got a new one I'm about to install, so it's not
on
annoying.
my right hand side to where I can see it as I come back around and land. You got the threshold out there. So interesting. Really interesting.
Now, while you're training, is there like a typical altitude you like to fly on, or is it?
Yeah, so for gliding distance, I usually go to about 2,500 before I cross the bay. Just for gliding distance, so I can glide the hard land. And then we need to be at specific altitudes for different maneuvers. So like stalls, we need to be at a certain altitude for, so we can recover, and some different items. So yeah, so we were climbing up to about 3,000 there and just started to get that ice right away. More traffic, 242, 3 and 4. We're going to be entering right traffic, or are entering right traffic, just to be 4 now on the right downwind runway 4, Homer.
So now I could easily keep the runway out my right side and just kind of hook it all the way around until on short final.
Alright, so we'll pull this back. I'll do my landing checklist. Carpy on, gas is on both, undercarriage is down a lot. Mixture is full rich, prop, seatbelt switches. You got your seatbelt on?
Yes, sir.
Alright. Homer traffic, 242, 3 and 4, right. Base runway 4, Homer, base to final. I can't see a darn thing. Yeah, pretty crazy.
This is where knowing how to set up the airplane, just let it fly itself, really helps.
Okay, I've got this dialed pretty good. Okay, pretty nice. Homer traffic, 23 and 1 final runway 4, Homer. Good, a little steep.
Here's where I just kind of go to peripheral vision to land, looking out the side.
There we go. Landing without being able to see anything.
So just one of those things that crept up. Really not too big of a deal. I wasn't really stressed out at all. It's just working through the problem. Any questions on that?
What kind of plane was the operator flying?
The operator?
The guy that didn't report freezing rain?
Oh, 206, 207. That's what that operator flies. But it definitely doesn't have, they don't have anti-ice or de-ice. They were just flying a lot lower. They'd go at about 1,000 feet and they wouldn't get in that stuff. But because I was climbing to get across the bay, I got into it, so.
But he knew you were going to end up asking a question.
Well, yeah, he was fighting it all day. He told me later he was fighting it all day, and then he called it sticky rain. He didn't say the ice word. So, it was kind of funny at the end of the day, but it's like, come on, man, just report it. So I'm assuming that because of their operator rules, if there was reported ice, then he couldn't fly over there, so that's why he's doing that. All right, so far we have a veggie sandwich. Go ahead.
Why do you have a cross right in your windshield? Does like
Uh,
black marker look like?
Yeah, so it's called you use a grease pencil and you kind of create a crosshairs, and so the student can see rudder movements and things easier when you're trying to teach them coordination. So that's why I put it on there in the couple of the beginning hours of their training. What kind of airplane did you learn in?
Grumman Yankee?
Okay, is that tandem or?
So I said.
Okay, side by side. So yeah, especially side by side where they can't see straight down the middle, really helps to have kind of little crosshairs that they can use. So, okay, so some meat now. So, private pilots without instrument, raise your hand again. Okay, so quite a few, okay? So seek a rating. Maybe instrument rating is in for you guys. And instrument rating helps a lot. Trains you to be a better pilot. Now, is it really useful around here? That's debatable, because in the wintertime, you're basically going with ice all the time. So unless you have an airplane to go in it, maybe not as useful, but it's definitely going to help bump you up for sure. There's no better time to do it, to do training. So what I hear a lot is people delay. So how many have had their private pilot license for 10 years without an instrument? At least 10 years. Okay, a couple of you, 5 years-ish? Okay, so several of you, okay? So looks like most of you are pretty new and haven't got your instrument rating. That's understandable, but it's definitely something that's really helpful. I know it's adding a ton on, but man, it's really helpful. Here in Alaska, we fly so close to weather all the time. It'd be really helpful to have that instrument rating. VMC and the IMC is still one of the #1 causes of accidents in general aviation. And we don't so much get that here in Alaska. What we get is controlled flight into terrain, which is people that can fly okay in the clouds, because they're basically flying marginal VFR all the time anyway, but they hit a mountain when there's some stuff they can't see. So it's pretty common. But that's kind of not what this is about. This is about adding a big chunk of training to your portfolio, okay? There's this book called The Killing Zone. You may want to look it up. Kind of has a dramatic title. But the premise of the book is that as long as you continue your flight training, you become a safer and safer pilot. It's those private pilots that just leave the nest and go do their own thing, and they're that way for the rest of their lives, that are the most dangerous pilots in terms of accident statistics, okay? So there's no better time to get your instrument rating. In other words, what I mean by that is there's no reason to delay. Just start working on it little by little. You don't have to go all in right now. You don't have to have all the money and time right now. Maybe enroll in a ground school and get going with that first, and just chip away at it. Because if you just chip away at it little by little, eventually you'll be able to get the ratings. How many plan on getting an instrument rating within the next few years? Good. I like that. Oscar, good. All right. Okay, it's forced and guaranteed learning, because the FAA, that's what they require, right? They have their standards you have to meet, and you will get that training and you will pass it off with the DPE in order to get your instrument. And it's a big bump, okay? Every time you get a rating, it's a big bump in your proficiency and what you know as a pilot. That's just the way it is. And outside instrument rating, the more you add, the better it is. We've got endorsements you can add. We've got commercial rating, CFI ratings, on and on and on, okay? Anytime you engage in really intense flight training, you're gonna really help yourself. And then this thing finally starts to get delicious because we get some meat on top of it. And that's what an instrument rating or some sort of rating is gonna do for you, okay? I would take that burger without all the veggies and cheese, okay? I would take it with the bun and the meat, but I want the meat on there. So those ratings are really gonna help you out to add to your experience. Okay, now we're gonna get saucy. And okay, who's heard of the devil and the angel on the shoulder? Okay, how many of you have succumbed to the devil on your shoulder before in aviation? I have. Okay, not a super good feeling. Okay, listen to the angel on your shoulder. There is this gut instinct on something that is safe versus unsafe. Sometimes those things, it's okay because you're going to stretch a little bit and learn, but listen to the angel on your shoulder because it's going to tell you what to do most of the time. Okay, hazardous attitudes, who knows what they are? Anyone know what they are? Get theiritis is one, yep.
Yeah, that was the one out of the six.
Okay, get theiritis, there's anti-authority, macho. What was the other one? Resignation, invulnerability, impulsivity. I have another one I've added, is know-it-all. Okay? So we need to know what our own personal hazardous attitudes are. We all have every single one of them to a certain extent. I would say that mine are probably anti-authority and impulsivity maybe. The anti-authority is up there at the top, okay, for me. So know what yours are, because if you can recognize those things early, then it's going to help you make good decisions. And that's part of just being honest with yourself and knowing who you are and what you should do next, okay? And resist, maybe not resist risk, because anything you do in aviation is risky, but resist too much risk, okay? There has to be a balance. We'll talk later about this a little bit more. And then the golden rule, this is kind of a new one in the last year for me. Not that it always hasn't been this way, but come home no matter what, okay? Whatever your decision making is, make sure that it's setting you up to come home to your family and friends. That's gonna set up some weird, embarrassing situations sometimes, okay? I was up at Summit Airport near Denali this summer with a student. We did his long cross country, we camped overnight, we dipped the tanks the next morning, and we didn't have enough fuel to get anywhere. So we were literally like thumbs up on the road, trying to go get MoGas. I can put MoGas in my airplane, okay? Because we didn't want to push into our fuel reserves and push ourselves too much. Ended up calling this old-time Bush pilot that was at Caldwell Airport and went 5 miles down the road, paid him in cash. I was on my way, okay? Much, much better, wasted a lot of time, but much better than not knowing if the engine is going to stay running going into Talkeetna. Just, you gotta set yourself up, okay? And again, be willing to be embarrassed. So then we'll add the sauce to our burger. This is going to take longer and longer to animate as we go through this, but there it is. Okay, I'm a mustard guy myself. That's just me. All right, Soldovia. So we showed that original airport shot taking off from a pretty long concrete runway, some trees, not too many. Now I'm going to go to Soldovia with 0300 powered Cessna 172 with 3 adults on board, shorter than that airport, with trees all around it, a lot closer. And so here's what happens. This one doesn't really have volume because the mic screwed up. So
that looks like longer.
it's definitely not longer. So come to find out, the windsock was broken.
Holy crap.
Which it all ended okay, but yeah, the the windsock was showing the opposite direction. I don't know how it does that. I don't know. Anyway. So we took off with the tailwind. Later, I literally picked up the dust and like let it drop from my hand to see where the wind was coming from. Okay, so a little tight. This is normal Alaska stuff, but definitely tighter than usual. Just fly the airplane, keep flying the airplane. As Bob Hoover says, does anyone know who Bob Hoover is? Okay, Bob Hoover, very famous. If you have a chance to read his book, very inspiring. He says, fly the airplane all the way through the crash. No crashes here, but keep flying the airplane no matter what. All right, learn continually. How many of you read aviation books? Okay, a couple. How many of you watch YouTube videos on aviation? Okay, quite a few. Good. Magazines? Any magazine people? Okay, a few. Some of you are raising your hands on every single one of them. That's a good sign. Okay. If you're not learning something continually, then you're falling behind in aviation. That's just the way it is. Okay. So some of those ideas, I already mentioned a couple of them. Podcasts. How many podcast listeners? Okay, a couple. Podcast is like a certain genre. Not too many people do it. I have a podcast, but I don't listen to podcasts. It's kind of interesting. Magazines and books. Lots of good material out there. I mean, there's just tons of good stuff. If you're a new pilot or anyone, even someone that's interested in aviation training or just learning, Flight Training Magazine by AOPA is awesome. I still learn things from that every single month. It's a great magazine. Seminars like this one, of course, and then videos on YouTube. Okay, and we got our sandwich coming up here. Come on, baby. Oh no, I have to do every single one of them. And we added the pickles. Pickle lovers? All right, cheese in it. We're gonna get another layer of cheese. Okay, stretch yourself. So we talked earlier about staying away from risk, but honestly, one of the best times, the best ways you learn is when you're flying close to the edge. It's not something that I recommend for brand new private pilots, but you learn the best when you're almost to your limits. Okay, that's where you learn most of your lessons. But you got to be really careful in that area. So, how many of you have felt like you've gone beyond your limits before as a pilot? Okay. Care to share any stories? Okay, go ahead.
30 knots direct crosswind and 132.
Okay. And you weren't quite ready for that, huh?
No.
I can tell you it can be done.
Yeah, no, it can be. It was, but it wasn't fun.
Yeah, it's not fun.
Yeah, so one day it was this early fall. I flew back to Dillingham, and it was calm on this side, and back on the other side of Lake Clark Pass, it was just blowing. Like I had like probably 45-degree tailwind, and I was probably going 160 knots ground speed, my 182, and I get back to the Dillingham area, and I was going straight to fish camp, and fortunately, I was talking to my dad before I went there, so the wind was blowing straight down the runway, but even though it was blowing straight down, it was just, the gusts were really hard, and I was coming into land, and I just hit really hard ground effect when I was coming in, and got a little scared, but I pulled my flaps up, and I brought it in nice and easy, but I did get a little scared, and that was a little too windy.
What did you learn from that?
I learned that, give it another day, and just not to push it.
Cool.
If it's windy, just to let it be.
Even a few hours can make a big difference.
Yeah.
It's tough when it's out somewhere like that where you can't really get good weather reports.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we deal with a lot here. You get on station and you have stuff to deal with, and then you don't have enough fuel to get anywhere, so you got to deal with it.
Yeah. So I think it was calmer. I was talking to my dad on the phone, but it takes me about close to 3 hours getting out there, and I think it picked up a little since I talked to my dad. And yeah, it was a little scary, but.
Gotcha. Yeah, we learn a lot when we're close to the edge, right? I mean, for those of you that have flown in that realm, it's important to not go over the edge because that's where training and everything else comes into play.
So what's the scariest situation you had?
It was that first takeoff. Yeah, that first takeoff video I had. Just because I I didn't really know what was happening, and I had to just fly the airplane as best I could. Thankfully, I had a good enough training not to keep pulling back, but that was a serious thing. I had another bad takeoff this summer from Soldovia, but I had my wife, my cousin, 2 babies, and a little kid on board, and the winds were terrible. They were a lot worse than I thought they were. It really wasn't much of a windy day, but something similar happened. It was spilling over the trees, and so that was way closer than that Soldovia takeoff there. But I had the training to kind of handle it and just keep flying the airplane. It didn't make me as nervous. But now I view that airport a bit differently and that airplane a bit differently and say, hey, do I really need to be doing this? Or should I just not fly this airplane with 3 people on board at this airport? So finding those limitations, and maybe not finding them, maybe trying to avoid them is better. But I went right back to that airport right after that. I had another load of passengers to bring back. And I just sat there for 15 minutes and just watched the other airplanes taking off. It was on the 4th of July. There were plenty of people visiting. I just watched people take off. I looked exactly where the wind was taking them down and how they were getting out of it. And then I adjusted my path or my plan to get out of there. Same runway and everything, but I just went a little bit wider around the valley, right along the trees instead of staying over the runway. And it gave me more distance to come back around into the wind and climb over the trees, and it wasn't a problem. So just little adjustments can make all the difference. Use the tools available to you. They shouldn't be used as a crutch though, but use what you have. Involve a team of people, okay? We all like to try to be the conquerors of the wilderness out there here in Alaska, okay? There are so many things you can use to help you. Flight following, flight service. I mean, you call it flight service and ask them to look at the cameras if you don't have radio service, or rather internet service, okay? They can look at it and say, hey, yeah, it looks good, or it doesn't look good, and then maybe you don't have to go all the way there. Maybe you can stop and wait it out somewhere else. Plenty of tools and plenty of people to help. I visited Delta Airlines one time, and they told me that their strategy for emergencies is to expand the team. I thought that was a pretty cool thing. So anytime something happens with a flight, they get as many people involved as they can to work the problem, to figure it out, to get it working. So look at your flights the same way. There are plenty of people out there to help you. And then enjoy the rewards of stretching yourself. Okay, here we go. More sandwich action. Did everyone eat before they came? I did. Alright, got another layer of cheese there. Let's see, which one is this? We might see it.
You going for this? No, I'm entering the 45.
Yeah, so I won't show this whole video, but this was us landing in Cedar City, Utah. That's actually where I learned to fly. Got my private there. And it was 8,000 foot density altitude and 30 knot winds. So I don't like density altitude, it's not fun. I like flying at sea level, it's a lot better. But we had flown from Reno all the way to Santa Fe this day, so it was quite a long haul. We just got done in the boring desert in Nevada and around Area 51. Objects were flying around us, I'm not even kidding. Air traffic control was telling us about targets that were all up above and around us. Pretty cool. But that's a density altitude example. Again, just going out there and experiencing new things is really, really important. So to top it all off, you talked about you having a mentor and mentoring others. Okay, that's one of the best ways to learn. One of the highest levels of learning is actually teaching someone else. So you hear it all the time with instructors that they didn't know anything about aviation until they started instructing. So definitely true. But you don't have to necessarily be an instructor to help someone else out, okay? What if you're just barely a private pilot? Some of you guys got your private pilot in spring, and you have a couple of stories to share with your friend that is a student pilot. Okay? Don't discount the experience that you already have. You can help someone a little bit with what they've already been through. Okay? Giving back is part of the cycle. I wouldn't be where I am today without a bunch of people giving away their time, money, and effort to help me. And I owe the same back to the community, so that's just kind of how things work. be gracious in accepting that if it is offered to you, and make sure that you get that in return. Pay it forward. And it is a very rewarding experience. So now we have our entire complete sandwich here. Our safety sandwich is what I call it, okay? There we go, some tomatoes on top. So, experience is the teacher. And that's why I say the flight hours are super important, because you're going to go out in the real world and you're going to experience a bunch of things that can't possibly be in a manual, okay? They're instructors and the textbooks and everything were just not creative enough for all the things that could happen. And so that's why having a good set head on your shoulders and a good base set of decision-making skills is very important. You will be tested no matter what you do in aviation. There's going to come a time where your training is going to come up against the limitations of what you know, and you will be tested. Lots of lessons happen there, and that's just how it is. Okay, sharpen your tools now so that when those situations do come up, you can handle them. It's good to do it now. Again, it's a community effort to go through this, involve other people, be part of the community. Here we are with the Airmen. There is a fantastic community in aviation. Take it online as well. One of my favorite platforms is Instagram. I've made so many friends on Instagram, and then I go and actually fly with them in other parts of the country. I know that sounds silly, but it's actually a real social network. It actually works pretty well. But put yourself out there, okay? Go out and meet people, expand your base, and learn from others. Like I said, golden rule, always come home, no matter what. Your decisions, anything you come up against, if you just remember that, then you're going to make the correct decisions and enjoy the journey, okay? Flying is meant to be fun. There are going to be times when it's maybe not so fun because you're in a bad situation, but you know, most of the time it's just glorious and amazing. And as I say all the time, throttle on. So that means keep progressing, keep having fun with it, keep moving on, and that's all I have.